Should be that's Bob Tet. If a woman said, I was granted a son overseas, and she added, my son died and then my husband died, she is believed. But if she said, my husband died and then my son died, she is not believed. However, we consider her statement, and she must therefore perform Kalitza, but not Yibum. If a woman said, I was given a Yavam overseas, and then she added, my husband died and then my Yavam, or my Yavam died and then my husband, she is believed. If she said her husband and her Yavam went overseas, and she said, my husband died and then my Yavam, or my Yavam died and then my husband, she is not believed. Because a woman is not believed to say that her Yavam died, so that she may marry, or that her sister died, so that she, excuse me, so that she may enter his household. Nor is a man believed to say that his brother died so that he perform even with his wife, or that his wife died so that he may marry her sister. Um, A woman whose husband and co-wife went overseas and they came and said to her, your husband died, may not marry or be taken in Yibum until she knows if her co-wife is pregnant. If she had a mother-in-law, she did not concern herself. However, if she departed while pregnant, she must concern herself. And Rabbi Shua says she needs not consider.
One more?
Really? I think that was three.
Nope.
Oh, I started. If there were two sisters-in-laws and each one stated, my husband died, and one is prohibited to marry because of the other's husband. If one had witnesses but the other did not, the one with witnesses prohibited to marry. Uh, Whereas the one with witnesses is permitted. If one had children but the other did not, the one with children is permitted to marry, and whereas the one without children is prohibited. If they were taken in Yubim and the Yavam then died, they're prohibited from remarrying. Reb Elazar says, since they're permitted to the Yavam, they're permitted to all men.
Okay. Gimel. Ein me'idim ela al partsuf apanim im hachotim. So if somebody wants to come and testify that somebody died, they have to have been able to identify him. And in some cases, it can be a bit of a mess. And what is enough to identify a person is his face along with the nose, right? So that means basically the cheeks, forehead, and nose. That's usually enough to identify a person. It's very unique, and it's actually an interesting exercise I did once when I was organizing an activity for some kids. They were doing a treasure hunt, and part of the treasure hunt was like I gave them a photo. I had a whole bunch of adults at the picnic, and I gave a photo of a part of the face of the adult. Then they had to look at the photo and identify who it was, and they would go to that adult and get their next clue. Right.
Very, that's
Um,
good.
and um, and I was taking different pictures of their face, or like or maybe from their back or whatever. But they struggled if you didn't give them a piece of the nose.
That's very interesting. That was
Yeah,
a good thing for that's good
interesting
activity.
thing. But noses are very very distinctive. Yeah. Um, anyway, so if a person's going to testify about that, they have to have seen the person's face, right? Afal pi sheyesh simanim begufo v'kelav. Oh no, but he had a wart on his ear. Oh, he had a mole on the side of his neck, and I recognize that mole. No, that's not good enough because other people can also have moles on the side of their neck. Okay. And certainly not on his clothing because even if his shirt is monogrammed Steve, you know,
Right,
if somebody else could have borrowed his shirt.
right, right. Yeah.
So no, that's not good enough. Okay. Ein meidin ela ad shetetze nafsho. And furthermore, you cannot say that he's dead unless you have actually seen him dead. Not good enough. Va'afilu ra'uhu meguyad. Even if they saw that he was in a battle with somebody and he was losing badly without going into too much of the gory details. But Salova, he was hanging from a cross. Or he's being mauled by a lion. Okay. If you see that, if you did not see him actually die, you cannot say for sure that he died because maybe the lion got distracted or something else came, and he managed to survive. Okay. Ein ma'idin ela ad shlosha yamim. And furthermore, you cannot testify about a body that's died more than 3 days ago, because then the body has started to decompose and it no longer looks the same as it used to. Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba Omer lo kol ha'adam v'lo kol ha'makomas v'lo kol ha'shas shavin. He says that 3 day thing is kind of a guideline more than anything else because people who are fatter will decompose faster, and in places that it's warmer, they'll decompose faster than places where it's colder. And so he says it's not you can't use the 3 days thing. It's got to be sort of just identifiable or not identifiable. But the halacha doesn't follow him. There's the flat 3 day rule, and that's it. Okay. Nafal lamayim. What happens if you saw a person fell into the water and did not emerge? And now, like, it's 5 minutes later and nobody is holding their breath for 5 minutes underwater. Bain sheyesh lahin sof. Now, whether water has the end or does not have an end, which means does it have a visible shoreline? So if you're in a lake and you can see the opposite shore of the lake, you'd be able to see where he's getting out. Although I'm thinking like the Kinneret, you can see the opposite shore, but you can't see if somebody's getting out there. But nonetheless, that would be called Maim She'en Lahem Sof. If you can see the shores, then you could watch out for him, or even if you can't see the shores. Ishto Asura, the wife cannot remarry if you did not see anything. This says the Tanakama. Rabbi Meir comes and says, Nah. Maaseh be'echad shenafal labor hagadol v'ala la'acha shlosha yamim. So there was a case where somebody fell into a big into a big hole. Oh, sorry. This is Rabbi Meir's opinion that we said at the
Right.
beginning, right? He says there was a maaseh where somebody fell into this big cistern, and he came out after 3 days. Somehow he had managed to keep his head above water. So therefore, you must suspect if somebody fell into water and you didn't see their head emerge, but maybe they found some way of getting their head up, um, and keeping themselves alive. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Maaseh besuma sheyard litzbol b'mara. Now I've got a contradictory case where a certain blind man went into a cave to Tovel, and his assistant came with him, and there was an accident, and they fell and disappeared under the water. V'shahu kadesha tetze nafsham, um, and they stayed there for as long as it would take for a person to die. V'hisiu nashosehem, and the Beis Din gave permission for their wives to remarry. Interesting Maaseh Shehaya, because you think about a cave. If there's some water in a cave and people disappear into the water, um, don't you like send somebody after them to like dive and see if you can find the bodies? How big? I suppose it's not true. There are some caves where you've got like a big. It must have been like a big underground lake, so where it's not possible to like just go and feel around. Anyway, so I just have this picture of like you go into a mikveh and it's a little puddle of water. Anyway, Vishuv Maseh Ba'asiyah. There was another case in a place called Asiyah. Be'echad sheshilshuhu liyam. A guy, he descended on a rope into the sea, and then something pretty unspeakable happened because lo ala biyadam ela raglo. They pulled him out, and all that came up was his leg. Okay, Amru Chachamim. The Chachamim said, Mina arkuva ulamala. If the leg was above his knee, in other words, what was left was less than was severed in his thigh.
Right.
Tinaseh. Then his wife can remarry after a year at least, because that is called a treifa. That somebody's not going to survive for more than a year with an injury like that. But min arkuva lamata lo tinaseh. But from the knee down, he might have survived, and
Mhm.
therefore the widow cannot. Well, we can't assume that she's a widow because he might have survived. Um, so again, a contradictory Maaseh Shahaya compared to the Summa. So this is the reason why they permitted his wife was because he was a treifa, not because he was drowned.
Ah, okay.
Right. So
Oh.
they can't assume that he was drowned. Um, so Tachlis, what's the halacha that comes out of this? Is I don't know because there are a lot of contradictory things over here. I'm guessing you've got to have a clear idea that a person is dead before you can permit his wife to remarry. Anyways, Mishnah Hey, afilu shama min hanashim omros meis ish ploni dayo. So even if he walks past a gathering of women and they're busy hacking among themselves and saying, "Oh, did you hear that Fred died?" And they're all speaking hearsay. None of these women were actually there to see Fred dying, so that it's not like they can come and be witnesses. But if these women they're just talking by themselves and spreading the news, that's enough. That's enough to say, "Oh, yeah, Fred's dead." Interesting. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu shama min hatinokos omrim hare anu holchin lispod v'likbor es ish ploni. Even if you hear kids saying, "Ah, yeah, we're going to Fred's funeral today," then he can go back overseas and say, I heard that Fred died, and that's his. So we can tell his wife to remarry. Bein shehu miskavein or bein she'eino miskavein. And if when you're hearing on this hearsay, it doesn't matter whether the person is telling you because they're saying, go back overseas and tell Fred's widow that Fred is dead and she can remarry. Um, or if they just happen to be talking and he happens to know that Fred comes from overseas and he's going to go and tell them that okay, Fred's dead. Um, So, so that's the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer b'Yisrael ad sheyahem miskavein. It's that only true of a Jew that if he's intending to tell you information. Uva goy im hayam miskavein ein edos or edos. If a guy comes up to you and says, I saw that Fred is dead, you don't accept that because that is there he's telling you there might be mischief in his mind that he's trying to mess up. He's trying to mess up Fred's widow. Okay, so we don't suspect a Jew of that, but a non-Jew we do suspect of that. However, if the guy is just like sitting and chatting and says, "Yeah, I was sitting here fishing this week, and there's this Jewish guy, Fred, came and he was I saw him eaten by sharks." If you hear that and say, "Well, I know Fred. Yeah, yeah, he was that guy." It describes him. Yeah, it was that guy. So if he's just Mesiach lefi tumo, when he's
Right.
right, he's talking innocently and telling a story, right, and doesn't know that Fred doesn't know that Fred's got a widow. If he's just telling you that as a fact, that's admissible. So we see that, and that we also saw that with non-Jews by kashrus, is that remember when we were learning about like a time isser, so like basa b'chalav. If you ask if some milk fell into the fleshika soup, this is according. Well, I mean that's not la halacha. We don't do this anymore. But according to Shulchan Aruch, um, if let's say some milk fell into the fleshika soup and you don't know if there's a time or not. So you call over a non-Jew and say, listen, you know a bit about cooking. You want to just taste this and tell me what you taste in the soup? And he tastes it and he says, it's yeah, there's some coriander in there and there's some yeah. And you say like, well, what about milk? Do you think it's got a milky kind of a taste? He says, nah, there's no milk in here. And you say then says the Shulchan Aruch, you can rely on that because you're asking him not because you're telling him it's kashrus.
Right.
Say, it won't be kosher if it tastes of milk. And then you've blown it because now he's thinking, oh, okay, well, I mean, your silly rules, I don't care about your silly rules. And in fact, I'd be quite happy for you to break your silly rules.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Tomorrow on Shabbos, we're going to do the last two Mishnayos of Yevamos and the first Mishnah of Kesubos.
I'm sorry, which one?
Kesubos.
Kasubos. Okay. Kasubos. Okay. All right. Um, okay, we have Yud Gimel, Yud
No.
Aleph, right?
Yes.
Okay. If one was competent and one was a deaf mute, if the
Oh, wait,
Yavim come,
hold on a second. We're in the Gedola and Katana. That's the adult and a minor.
okay. If one was an adult and one was a minor, if the Yavam cohabitated with the adult and then with the minor, or if his brother then cohabitated with the minor but did not disqualify the adult, if the Yavam cohabitated with the minor and then with the adult, or his brother then cohabitated with the adult, he disqualified the minor. Rav Elazar says we teach the minor to refuse him. If a minor Yavam cohabitated with a minor Yavama, they must wait for each other to grow up. If he cohabitated with an adult Yavama, she must wait for him to grow up. If a Yavama stated within 30 days, he did not cohabitate with me, we coerce him to perform Kalitza with her. If she stated that after 30 days, we request of him that he perform Kalitza with her. If he admits to it, then after 12 months, we could coerce him to perform Kalitza with her. If a woman vowed not to derive benefit from a Yavam, if she vowed so during her husband's lifetime, we coerce him to perform Kalitza with her. If she vowed so after her husband's death, we request of him that he perform Kalitza with her. However, if she intended this, then even if she vowed during her husband's lifetime, we only request of him that he perform Kalitza with her. Okay. Okay. All right. You won't believe this. I can't believe what you just said. We're going to start what tomorrow?
Kasubas.
Kasuas?
Yeah, Kasubas.
The short-term memory is like really just
It's all right. I
it's
do that too.
no, it's terrible. All right. Base Vav. One who betrothed one of two sisters but does not know which of them he betrothed must divorce each of them. If he died and left one brother, he performs Kalitza with both. And if he left two brothers, one performs Kalitza, the other would perform Yibum. However, if he went ahead and married them, we do not force them to divorce. Two men who betrothed two sisters and neither one knows which one is betrothed, each one of them gives two divorces. If they died and each one left a brother, each performs Kalitza with both. If one left one brother and the other left two brothers, a single brother performs Kalitza with both, and of the two, he performs Chalitza, and the other one may perform Yibum. However, if they went ahead and married them, we do not force them to divorce. If each left two brothers, a brother for one performs Chalitza with one of the sisters, and a brother the other performs Chalitza with the other sister, then the two remaining brothers may each perform Yibum with the widow to receive Chalitza from the other's brother. If both went ahead and performed Chalitza, the other two may not perform Yibum, but one must perform Chalitza and the other may perform Yibum. However, if they went ahead and married them, we do not force them to divorce. The commandment is to the eldest to perform Yibum, but if the youngest anticipated him, he gains it. One who was suspected in connection with a slave woman and then she was freed, or in the connection with a non-Jewish woman and she then converted, she may not marry her. He may not marry her, but if he did marry her, we do not force him to divorce her. One who was suspected in connection with another man's wife and they compelled him to divorce her, even if he married her, he must divorce her.
Okay. Yoma.
We have Vav. But what did he do? He parted the strip of red wool, half of it he tied to the neck and half he tied between his two horns and pushed it backwards. It tumbled down, and before it reached halfway down the mountain, it was torn limb from limb. He would return and sit under the shade of the last booth until it became dark. And when does he contaminate clothing? As soon as he gets out the wall of the outside the wall of Yerushalayim, Reb Simon says, from the time he pushes him down to the precipice. He came to the ox and the he-goat which were to be burned. He tore them and removed their sacrificial parts. He put them in a plate and burned them upon the altar. He intertwined the limbs of the ox and the he-goat into twists and removed them to the place of burning. And from when do these people contaminate clothing? To when they go outside the wall of the courtyard. And Shimon says, for when the fire catches onto the greater part of the limbs. The sense of the Golan Gadol, the he-goat has reached the wilderness. How did they know that the he-goat had reached the wilderness? They set up watch posts and waved cloths, and those that knew that the he-goat had reached, and thus they knew that the he-goat had reached the wilderness. Rabbi Yehuda said, but if they had a dependable signal from Yerushalayim to the place of the he-goat's sharp beak was 3 mil, they walked the mill, returned the mill, and tarried for the time needed to walk a mill. Thus they knew that the he-goat had reached the wilderness. Rabbi Yishmael says, but they did not have another sign. A strip of red wool was tied atop the temple entrance. So when the he-goat reached the wilderness, the strip of wool whitened, as it had been said, even if your sins will be like crimson thread, they will become white as snow. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. We have Shemos. Shemos. Should be Gimel Daled. When does this apply? If he did not speak, if he gave permission to a member of his family or his bondsman or bondwoman to separate truma, his truma is truma. If he annulled it before he separated the truma, his truma is not truma. But if he annulled it after he had separated the truma, his something happened over here. What happened to the page? I just have he had separated the truma his, and that was it. There's
Um,
nothing else.
so did you
Word
go in
his.
the right direction?
No, probably not. Thank you very much. What else with you? I don't know. His truma is not truma, but if he annulled it after he had separated the truma, his truma is truma. The laborers have no authority to separate truma except the treaders, since they render the wine press unclean immediately. If one says the truma of his seep is within it and it meiser within it, this truma meiser is within it. Rabbi Shimon says he has designated. Our sages say not unless he says in the north or in the south of it. The Elazar his Chizma says if one says the truma of the heap from it or is from it, it has designated it. From Eliezer ben Yaakov says if one says the tenth of the meiser is truma meiser for it, he has designated it. If one separates truma before bikurim, meiser rishon must before truma or meiser sheni before meiser rishon. Though he transgressed the prohibition, what he had done is done, since it stated, "You shall not delay to offer the abundance of your fruits and your liquors." Okay, only else. Okay, Gimel Dalet. If so, if a corpse is outside and its hair is inside, the house becomes tameh. The bone on it has an olive-side piece of flesh. If part of this bone was brought under the roof of the house, the contents of the house becomes tameh. There are two bones. One of each has on it half an olive-sized piece of flesh. If part of each bone was brought under the roof of the house, the contents of the house become tameh. If they were attached by man, the house remains tahor because whatever is attached by man is not considered an inherent attachment. What qualifies as death blood? An eighth of a log of blood flowed out of a dying person while he was still alive, and an eighth flowed out after he died. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Ishmael says a quarter log of blood that flowed out while the person was alive and a quarter log that flowed after his death were combined. And from this mixture, a quarter log was taken. Eliezer says the son of Rabbi Yehuda says both of these are like water. What is death blood? When there is a hanged person whose blood was flowing out and a quarter log of blood was found beneath him, the blood is tameh. But if a corpse blood was dripping and a quarter log of blood was found underneath it, blood is tahor. Rabbi Yehuda says not so. Rather, that which flows out is tahor, and that which drips is tameh. An olive-sized piece of corpse in a room must have an opening of 1 handbreadth, and a whole corpse must have an opening of 4 handbreadths to prevent tumor from spreading to the other openings. But to allow tumor to spread, one separate handbreadth suffices. If it is larger than the volume of an olive, it is treated as a whole corpse. Rabbi Yossi says the spinal column and skull are treated like a whole corpse.
And finally, Adios.
It also Gimel Vav, a base Vav. There are 3 things that Rabbi Ishmael said, and the Akiva did not agree with him. Garlic, unripe grapes, or unripe grain that one crushed while it is still day. That Ishmael says he may finish after dark, but Rabbi Akiva says he may not finish after dark. There are 3 things about that the disciples stated before Rabbi Akiva. 2 of the things they said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. One of them they said in the name of Rabbi Shua. The 2 things they said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer were a woman may go out and go out with a city of gold on Shabbos, and pigeon flyers are unfit for testimony. And the one thing said to Rabbi Akiva in the name of Rabbi Shua was, if a sheretz was in the mouth of a weasel, and the weasel was walking over some loaves of truma, so that there was doubt whether the she sheretz touched the truma or did not touch it, the doubt is ruled tahor. Rabbi Akiva stated 3 things concerning two stages, agreed with him, and concerning one that did not agree with him. Concerning a line work of sandals, the sages agreed that it is susceptible to the tumor of midras. The sages also agree with Rabbi Akiva concerning the remnants of an oven that they must be at least 4 tefachim in size. But the sages used to say that 3 tefachim were sufficient, but they conceded to Rabbi Akiva. And concerning one that did not agree with him, namely concerning a chair from which 2 of its seat slats were removed, the next one next to the other, which Akiva declared susceptible to tumor contamination, but the sages declare it not susceptible to tumor contamination.
Okay. All right. And have a wonderful Shabbos.
Enjoy Shabbos and great Shabbos. Enjoy. I'll see you
Yeah.
on Sunday.
Bye.